Basically, you keep an eye on it. If it runs out of battery, plug it in. So I need to get a splitter so you can have two things plugged in, but I've not got one. So it's just only if it runs out of battery. There you go. Yeah, so take that out, and then so that's plugged into the charging point basically. Okay.
showreel's come to an end, we're now watching.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hello! Can everybody hear me? Yes? Yeah. Brilliant, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I've got a little bit of a preamble before Gary comes on. So yeah. So this is, we're streaming this, aren't we, as well, yeah? Basically, yeah. So anyway, welcome. I've done a little bit of a preamble. Welcome back, everybody, to Conference Week 11. So it is good to be back in person with real people and guests on campus in Preston. Yeah. It's 2 years ago since our last Conference Week. So most of the audience here probably won't be able to remember what an in-person Conference Week was actually like. But that was before, obviously, the COVID situation. But we're now back on track. So, but before we get underway, there's 4 talks today. This is the first of 4. But we wanted to just take the opportunity, we always do a little housekeeping. So firstly, toilets. So there are toilets at the back and to the side there. So should you want to go to the restroom, that's where the toilets are. Secondly, we have a tuck shop at the back centre, which I know some of you by the looks of it have already found. So again, that's all in aid of the degree show. So please, you know, it's reasonably priced, isn't it? Yeah. Yes. We're also running a daily raffle. So at the moment, we've got several raffle prizes at the back, probably about 8 or 9, but also we've got a star one here as well. I'll be collecting. This is a Chase book that's been donated by Gary. Chase, the latest book as well, so that's the star prize. But we'll be collecting. I think Karen's bringing some as well, and Mike Rigby. So what we decided to do today is have a raffle right at the end. So I know at the moment we've sold 1 strip. Whoever that person is in for a bonanza. So what we decided to do, and because nobody's really been vigorously selling raffle tickets, it gives you the opportunity at lunchtime to get some loose change. How much are these strip? £1? £1 a strip. Fahima, is it £1 a strip? Yes, they are. So yeah, yeah, loose change. Again, all funds go towards the degree show. So yeah, I think, and we have some good prizes as well. There's alcohol. There's a book, some chocolate. Tin spray mount. 50 quid. 50 quid a tin spray mount. Right, lost my thread now. Running order, raffles. Yeah, so also on the back of your tickets, you notice there's 10 stamps. So what that means is basically make sure you get your ticket stamped at the door for each talk. Because if you get to 10, you will then into the prize draw on Friday, the big prize draw. We've got some spare tickets at the back just in case you haven't brought them today, so just get one of those and get it stamped. So 10 talks gets you into the star prize. Yes, Gary?
Yeah.
And the star prize, you're asking, is a Toyota Yaris. Toyota Yaris. So all proceeds again go towards the final year. Quite a good prize. Fourthly, could everybody now? Could you put your phones on silent to avoid embarrassment? Because we are simultaneously recording this on YouTube as well. How many people have got watching so far, Nilesh?
14.
14. Really, hello, 14 people. And also at the end, there will be some questions and answers as well. So an opportunity basically to ask Gary some questions, which is going to be obviously, because I know that some of you have got to write about the week and write about failure, so there might be a few questions that pop into your head as you go through. So I think without much further ado,
Yeah, I'll go for it.
I would like to introduce our first speaker, a designer of great stature, as you can see, Mr. Gary Whitworth. Cool.
Thanks everyone. Can everyone hear me okay, just before we start? So first I just want to say thanks to Andy and Ted for inviting me, and also for allowing me to be the first speaker, because I can get all the cliches about failure out of the way and then everyone sounds like they've copied me, so that's perfect. As Andy said, I'm Gary, I'm from the Chase. I've kind of given this talk today 2 names because I couldn't really decide, which is a bit of a failure in itself, but the first name is Carving the Elephant, which sounds really weird, probably doesn't make any sense now. Obviously you can see for the Chase we're represented by the elephant there, but it'll make sense in a little bit. But the other name that I gave it is how making mistakes made me a better designer, which is really kind of what the whole of this talk is about. There's a lot of kind of mistakes, missteps, and kind of navigating those missteps for all the projects that I'll talk through. And that's really just kind of, you know, what I want to go through today. Probably it's the theme for the week, is really how it's okay to make mistakes. That is all about the process. And I've been in your position before. I've been to quite a few design talks over the years, and especially when I was a student, I really struggled with, you know, kind of wondering what went on behind the scenes. You kind of, every design talk tends to be, here's the great work, here's it all finished and done. No one ever really goes into what built up to it. They just make it look really easy. So when I was a student, I just thought everyone was just amazing, and it was like that. So hopefully this kind of reveals a bit of insight into what goes on behind the scenes. So first off, who am I? This is my staff picture at the Chase. That's Andy Mayer's, one of our artworkers. I'm Gary. I'm a designer at the Chase. I've been at the Chase for 9 years, well, close to 9 years now. I started straight out of uni at the Chase. Been lucky to have got a job straight away. As Andy said, I'm a designer from here. I came to UCLan. I was also born in Preston and grew up just outside of Chorley. So really, it kind of seems that I don't really go further than 20 miles outside of where I was born, but you know, I have done. And you might be asking who are the Chase. So for those of you that know, the Chase Creative Consultants, we're as I say, a creative consultancy. We've been around for kind of 35 years. But rather than just kind of talk about the Chase, I thought I'd show you some of our work. So here's a quick show reel of kind of 35 years worth of the Chase work. Oh, no worries. Anyway, so I'll go through that. Yeah, so we've been around for 35 years. As you'll see in the film, we've not really got a typical client or a typical project. We're known for quite a lot of different projects over the years. So realistically, like, we'll tackle kind of any project, big or small. And we've done everything from like large rebrands to kind of huge kind of designs of football stadiums. So I'll just pop it back, see if that works. There we go. Yeah, so that's us. So as I said, we've been around 35 years, so a very long time. Started in Manchester, but we have 2 studios, one in Manchester, one in London. And when we started, really the aim was to create a design agency that was a bit like the big ones in London. At the time, Ben Casey, our founder, was, you know, he didn't understand why there wasn't this kind of design studio up in Manchester, up in the north, that was doing great creative work. So we started one. So we've been around 35 years. We're a group of about 30-ish people. I say ish because we've not been in the studio a while, so I've not done a head count. But we've also got, as part of that, we've got a film company which are Oscar and BAFTA nominated, and we've also got an architecture firm as well as part of that. So, as you can see, we've the kind of run through there, we don't really have a typical project, a typical client. We've designed everything from football stadiums and visual identities for football teams. So some of you might recognise this is Deepdale, Preston North End Stadium down the road. But we do everything from that all the way down to stamps. So we do a lot of work with Royal Mail, and I'll be talking through some of that today. And that was one of the Dennis and Nash's stamps that we designed that was released last year. So yeah, so we've got a wide variety of work, but throughout all that 35 years and through all that work, we've always had kind of one philosophy, and this is where the elephant comes into play. So the philosophy from the Chase has been with us since the very beginning. It's been something that runs throughout every project that we do. It's always kind of front in mind whenever we're tackling a project, whether it be designing a football stadium or whether it be designing a set of stamps. This is our philosophy for everything. And it's all around the story about an old Indian craftsman. So the story is there was an old Indian craftsman who carved beautiful little elephants from unpromising blocks of timber. And when he was asked, how does he create such beautiful bits of work, he just replied, "I just cut away the wood that doesn't look like an elephant." And that's, a great metaphor for us when it comes to every project, because what we're trying to do is get rid of all of the excess stuff, all the stuff that's unnecessary to get to that elephant, the perfect idea, the perfect bit of communication. Every project we do, we question the brief to try and find that elephant in and amongst the wood. So the little wooden elephant has been kind of our mascot and our philosophy for the 35 years of the Chase. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk you through a few projects that I've done whilst being at the Chase in the 9 years that I've been there. These are kind of a bit of a mishmash of projects in a way, because when the brief was set to me about trying to talk about Close But No Cigar, it felt weird having to talk about mistakes, because again, like I said, whenever we do design talk, it's always like, here's a great project we did, aren't we great? And it's a bit weird to kind of go, well, here's a look behind the curtain and here's what actually happens in the build-up to some of these ideas. So hopefully, really, when I was in your position, hopefully this is kind of a nice level and calms you down in the sense that, we all make mistakes and we all get things wrong. So when I graduated back in 2013, I think it was, I said I was lucky enough to get a job offer from the Chase quite soon after graduating. I did a few placements here and there with Tommy and Rossi at Glorious, who were really kind to me. And then eventually got the job at the Chase, this is our old building at the right, this building on the right in Parsonage Gardens, just behind House of Fraser and Deansgate. And weirdly, when I started the show, I only found out a few months after, but the building I started in with the Chase was actually the place where my granddad started his first job as well, 60 years before as a plumber. So it's really bizarre how that works out. But we've moved to the other end of Deansgate now. But I remember the first day, the first week I was at the Chase, I was just a big bag of fear. I was scared shitless, because I'd just come out of uni, I'd done a placement year down in London, which I'd really enjoyed, but I was always really nervous about getting things wrong. I didn't want to be asking the wrong questions, doing the wrong things, getting things wrong. I felt that this is my first job in the design industry for a really big agency. I was really excited, but I was just really nervous. And that was it. I was afraid to get a misstep wrong. I forgot to do stuff because I didn't ask questions, which you should always ask questions no matter how stupid they are. And instead I was just kind of stunted. I didn't do anything. So the first few weeks I was just a bit nervous, and then the first project we worked on was one for Johnson Tiles. And this is the kind of project that kind of calmed me down a bit and made me realise that actually, design industry, whilst it's a lot quicker day to day, it can be a bit like uni in terms of the way you work. So Johnson Tiles, no prizes for guessing, are a tile company. They make obviously beautiful tiles, but they work a lot in the creative industries like architect firms and interior designers are their kind of lead audiences. And at the time when I joined the Chase had just done a massive project of kind of overhauling their website and all their sales materials into something that felt a lot more modern like these. So they'd gone for something that felt quite old hat, felt very 90s, and the Chase had done a huge job in kind of redesigning the sales materials, the website, and everything to make it feel a lot more modern and artistic and a bit sexier. And Johnson had said, they were doing this big rollout, huge new website, it was a big investment for them, and he'd said to us, if you have any ideas about how to promote the website, go for it. You know, even if they're a bit crazy, we'd love to hear them. We just want to think of like great ways to be able to get the word out to clients. So that was our brief internally. And after a couple of days of kind of, you know, the creative director Peter said, right, this is the brief. We need to come up with some fun ideas. What can we do? Could be like direct mail, can be, you know, anything really. You just want ideas. So I was like, okay, this is, you know, for me, this is a bit of pressure, but it was quite exciting. I was like, okay, it's like being back at uni. It's like tackling a D&AD brief or something, like, let's go for it. So a couple of days later, we all convened in the boardroom and we proceeded to put out all ideas. And again, I was quite nervous, but at this point, I was really settled because everything felt welcome. We all collaborated over the ideas, and then I realised it was just kind of like a bit like being at uni. And I'll go through the ideas with everything. I'll show you what they actually ended up going with. So this is, you know, it's about 8 years ago. Some of these ideas I think are still great. I'd love to do them, but they are a bit weird. And I completely understand that now, looking back at it, I don't know how sometimes we kind of thought, let's pitch this, because they are a bit strange. But you know, eventually it was a really good piece of work. So the first idea we had has probably one of the weirdest, worst bits of copy I'd ever written at the time on it, which was improve your lifestyles, which is horrible. And no surprise it didn't go with it. But the idea was that the premise was Johnson tiles are so good that we can make somewhere that looks a bit shit look amazing. So we thought, what if we chose like really naff parts of London or Manchester, where they get a lot of footfall, and just kind of do a kind of viral overnight campaign where we just rip up some of the stuff and replace it with Johnson tiles. So like walking down a really crappy street corner with all cracked flags and replacing them with like incredibly expensive Johnson tiles. The idea being that the street corner looks like amazingly better thanks to these tiles, and you could do the same with your house, kind of thing. As part of that, we were like, what if we chose a really horrible public toilet and retiled it in Johnson tiles? So thinking like the toilet in Trainspotting, where it's just like crap everywhere, it's horrible, but then one of the urinals is like doled out as if it's like Buckingham Palace. We thought, wouldn't that be weird? You know, you walked in, you'd be like, what is this? And then just a little like kind of marker that says, you know, Johnson tiles. So yeah. They didn't go with that. They thought that was too strange. The next idea we had, one interesting thing about Johnson tiles is that they manufactured, I think, something like 70% of all of the tiles that are in the London Underground, and have lasted for donkey's years. So we were like, well, we thought that's incredible. We need to do something about this. This needs to be made more aware of, and then it could be a way to drive it to the website. I.e., you know, these tiles have been here for so long, they're so iconic. Why don't you get some of your own? So we thought about, what if we create like almost an exhibition within the London Underground, but it just focused on the tiles. So by putting out big golden frames with the little kind of marker saying celebrating the history of tile manufacture, it would almost as if look like, you know, the tiles are a piece of art, and this is how amazing they are. Loved that idea. I think it still worked. They've not gone for it, so that didn't go for. Another silly idea we had was turning, you know, for Johnson tiles, for Scrabble tiles, could do Johnson Scrabble tiles. Again, another really silly idea. But the premise really that kind of made it work was architects and interior designers, when they're doing a job, they'll order a sample, they'll get it through, they'll choose the one that they want, and then they'll either bin the other one or they'll just keep it in the cupboard anyway and never see it again, which is incredibly wasteful, and Johnson were really keen on sustainability. So we thought if we create something that had kind of a dual purpose and something that was a bit more fun, then the architects, interior designers might keep it up on the wall. It keeps Johnson front of mind because they'll see the tiles all the time, and then also reduce waste, which again still think is a great idea, but we didn't go for it. But the final idea that we had, which is the one they ended up going for, was a lot simpler, and I think this is where the kind of the elephant philosophy comes into place, and this is the one that Johnson really loved. And the idea was just a really simple set of posters, beautifully crafted, that only featured Johnson tiles, but represented something else in each image. So the image you see here is a black tile on a red background, and the poster says next day delivery on samples, with the idea being it looks like a postbox. So it's just by simply placing a tile in one area, it has a dual meaning. So some it might just look like a black tile, but then afterwards, after seeing the copy, you kind of understand it's a letterbox as well. The other idea, overlaying the marble tiles to look like mountains to represent the great outdoors, which meant to be like all the new materials, all the natural materials that Johnson used in all the tiles. And then the final one was about launching the website, which obviously what they'd asked us to do. So setting out the tiles in a way that looked like a computer and a keyboard, with the copy just being simply, Johnson Tiles now online. And they loved this idea. And to be fair, out of the set of them, it is the strongest because it's incredibly simple. It was also quite cheap for them to produce because it was just a set of posters. They didn't have to speak to Transport for London and say, hey, can we hang some frames on the underground? And they didn't have to say to the council, can we rip up some flags and put our tiles in place? So it was really simple, really fit the brief, and was really strong. And that's what they went with. So the team had a great job in photographing the tiles and making them look perfect. So with a little bit of crafting, with some actual photography, this is how they ended up turning out. So this turned into free sample delivery. This is how the computer one turned out with the white keyboard rather than the black tiles. And then the mountain ones they actually didn't like. They thought the mountain ones was a bit too complicated. The idea was a bit off. So the team changed it so that it was just 2 tiles, a small one and a larger one to represent what's obviously like a Pantone chip, which is kind of universally recognised in that industry. And the idea being that they've got an extensive colour range. So as a set, they were just incredibly simple. It's just 2 tiles or a few tiles just photographed on a coloured background. Each of them had a very simple idea, but something that was visually quite strong. And it worked really well for them. It was a great, simple rollout campaign that they did, that the salespeople could give out, they could send out, and it won us quite a few awards as well. So it was great all around. But yeah, really fun, really simple idea for a really fun client, and it was ace, and they loved it. So that was kind of an example of how I thought I was making mistakes. I thought all my ideas were maybe a bit too silly, a bit too out there, and actually kind of leveled me a little bit. I was fine with it. I realised that's the job, even if they sound a bit stupid, they're still worth putting in there. The second project I'm going to go through is the Royal Mail yearbook. So it was about 5 years into the chase at this point, maybe 4 years, and we've been given the opportunity to pitch for the yearbook with Royal Mail. We do a lot of work with Royal Mail, we do a lot of stamp work. They're an amazing client to work for because they are incredibly creative and they're always up for hearing good ideas. And to design a stamp is always really fun because they last for years, you're kind of a part of history. But also a really difficult design brief to hit. You've got to design something that's like 50 millimeters wide by 30 millimeters, it's insane. But the yearbook is kind of a next level thing, and they do one of these every year, and what it is a collector's edition of all of the stamps that they've brought out that year. So they create this book and they print a few thousand copies, and it contains all of the stamps and it contains a chapter around each subject of the stamps that year. A lot of agencies, big agencies, have done these, and that's why I was really excited to do it. So Hat-Trick, people like Hat-Trick, Supple, The Chase have done a couple, True North, GBH, I think Pentagram have done one as well, and Mike Dempsey at CDH. So it's got a real kind of big lineage, and Royal Mail work with the best designers, and to get the opportunity to do this for me, I was really excited, but also quite nervous. So as part of this project, what you've got to do is, because it's representative of all of the 12 or 14 subjects that have come out that year, you've got to come up with a visual concept that can unite them all. So you can see the ones here, obviously 2020 was like 2020 vision, putting stamps first was all type-based and stuff. So we got the list through, and this is like a cross-section of all of the subjects that we had to come up with a concept for. It is so disparate, it's just weird. Like, you've got to say, all right, you've got to come up with a book and you've got to design the idea that unites David Bowie and windmills. Like, I looked into it, doesn't like windmills, never mentions windmills, so I was like, what is the connection here? Star Wars, I was like, amazing Star Wars, but then like, landmark buildings, I was like, what, you have Chewbacca in the Shard? I don't know, it was all a bit bizarre. So the tough part of this project is, you've got to design a 60-odd page book, which is a big task in itself, but ultimately fun, but you've got to come up with like the big idea. And it's ultimately going to be a visual concept. And the more and more we thought about it, the more actually we realised that, right, it's not a negative that we've got all these different like themes that we've got to cover. It's actually quite a big positive. And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, you know what, it is quite weird but quite cool that we've got to try and something that unites Chewbacca and David Bowie. There's something quite interesting in there. And then immediately when I started thinking about it, we started coming up with ideas of like, well, imagine if Chewbacca and David Bowie were in the same room, that would be weird, wouldn't it? And like if you had an architect and a whatever. And I started thinking of Sgt. Pepper's, the album cover Peter Blake did, because it's very similar. It's, you know, all these different kind of historical figures mixed with the Beatles. You know, it was just a real weird mishmash. And that started to roll in my mind, and then started thinking about, well, what if we did something similar? What if for every subject we created a scene from their, like, from that represents them, but make it, you know, quite strange. Rather than feel real, it felt a bit disjointed, or it felt like a bit staged. And then we started thinking about these kind of paper theatres, these dioramas, which have amazing depth. So we presented that. We said we want to come up with something that we call setting the scene. So it was basically we wanted to create a scene set for every subject, as if it was like a play, or if it was like a TV show, or it just felt a bit strange, a bit weird. And we wanted to do it out of paper. That was the big thing. I was really adamant. It was like, we've got to make this out of paper. It'll look great. Everyone will be like, wow, you've made all of this out of paper. That's incredible. I was like, yeah, and it'll look really cool. Royal Mail were really on board with it. They went, yeah, that's a great idea. That sounds ace. You can do it out of paper. We're like, yeah, we'll shoot it. Oh, it'd be really good. Really, really good. Right, go off and do it. You've got however many months. It was quite a good deadline. So we went through an absolute shit ton of these, as you'd imagine. So to do every scene, you've got to think about it. We've got to either photograph or source the photography for every scene. So for example, if it's like David Bowie, would we find like an image of the studio he recorded in? Then we've got to get all the images of David Bowie. Then you've got to plan the scene. You've got to print them, you've got to cut them, and then you eventually end up with something like this, which is in a photo studio in Peckham in London. So we sourced a photographer who'd done some Royal Mail stuff before and was really good with kind of art directing, like scene sets. And we told him the idea, and he was like, yeah, this is great, love it, really excited. And the first one we started to do was about Arnold Machin, who was the sculptor who made the bust for the Queen that's on every stamp. And we thought, wouldn't it be cool if we photographed the factory where all the stamps are produced, which is in Wolverhampton. And it's this amazing place, and we went there and photographed all the staff, the place, with the idea that we were just going to recreate it, but at really small scale, which is what we started to do. So as you can see here, we printed out we'd photographed the printers and all the people, and then we'd started creating a set, so that when you see it at one angle, it looks like one thing, which is incredibly time consuming. But really fun. We were having a great time. So this is Dylan, the photographer, and his assistant, and we were shooting it in his little studio in Peckham. So when you get at a low angle, you start to see it all coming together. So these are like, it's about 10 layers maybe of like different bits of cards. You know, you've got stuff in the foreground, stuff in the background. It's really cool depth. We started making like little characters out of people, putting them in place. So it was like our little own play set, and it was really fun. And then we would light it so it gave even more depth. And yeah, really, really fun, really good, but really time consuming. And then the trouble started to hit when we started doing the second one, which was about the royal wedding. It was the anniversary of the royal wedding of Prince Philip to Queen Elizabeth. And obviously we wanted to make it really authentic. So I had to find as much imagery of St. Paul's Cathedral from that era as I could. We couldn't go and shoot in St. Paul's, which was, made it harder. So I had to find everything at the same angle. Everyone pictured who was going to feature in it at the same angle. We didn't have the floor. We didn't know what the floor looked like, so I had to recreate the floor from light photography. And then we started just kind of shooting it, and we realised some of the angles were a little bit off, so we had to get... Anyway, it's a huge crafting process, and this is when it started to get quite tough, because we realised, like, if we can't shoot photography, it makes it really hard to get the angles right. But we did it, and it looked great, and you've got, Queen, Prince Philip, you've got the dressmaker, there's a couple of corgis, there's a radio, because it was the biggest radio broadcast. But it took ages, and this is the thing, it took a long, long time. I think we kind of underestimated actually how hard the project, well I did, underestimated how hard the project was going to be. So the concept we came up with was great, but was taking way too much time to do. And many hours later, this was the final shot. So the shot that you saw of the paper printers, this was the final thing. And I was like, oh, this is great, looks ace, how cool's the depth, all this kind of stuff. It's all photography we've shot and then layered. But then when we showed it to people, the one bit of feedback we got was no one realised it was made of paper, and no one realised it was not a real shot. They just thought we'd been and shot it in the factory, or we'd photoshopped it. So we'd gone through all this effort, all this time, all these bloody fingers of cutting my finger off with scalpels, because for an image that was great, but no one realised all the hard work that went into it. And it was at this point that we were kind of like quite a way down the deadline, and we had 14 to do, and we'd done 2, planned the rest, but we were like, oh my god, like this is maybe a bit too far. And also, it started to realise it wasn't worth the effort that we were putting into it. So we kind of we spoke with Royal Mail, and they were like, yeah, I think it's great, but it's taking a bit of time. Maybe we need to find a different way of doing it. The idea is still solid. So we decided to do the idea not with paper. We scrapped the paper bit because it was too difficult. And instead we did it with a mix of Photoshop and a mix of actually doing it in camera and doing it in real life, which was much easier, took less time and was a lot less stressful and still looked as great. So kind of halfway through we had to kind of change tact, and that was really like what graphic design is a lot of the time. It is problem solving, and that problem might be what is the brief, what do you want to get out of the brief. The problem might be how the hell do we achieve this without breaking the deadline, because that's the real big bit of the brief, is making sure you do it on time. So we switched to a much simpler method. This was a shoot that we did just outside of London in a lovely village with a woman who is the preeminent expert on ladybird books. If there's anything about ladybird books she doesn't know, it's not worth knowing. This is not where she lives, this is a shed. She doesn't just live in a tiny house. But this is filled with like every single ladybird book that's ever been made. Has like ephemera, like original sales boxes, sales stuff. It was a real treasure trove. So we were allowed to kind of use her shed as our set, and we just spent the whole day, nice sunny day, just rearranging her old. She loved us at the end, but at first I think she was getting worried because we just started picking stuff up, going, let's move that here, let's move that there. It needs to look like this. But eventually we ended up with this shot, which actually was a lot quicker to do and actually felt a lot more, had a bit more depth on it. And it was funny because a couple of people said, oh, so you've done this with paper? And we were like, oh, no. So the one we hadn't done with paper, people thought we maybe had, which is frustrating. But it was great, and it was a lot easier, and it still had that sense of kind of a set that we wanted, like a kind of a scene that we'd created, but had loads of different things that we could caption. So like an original book that was from an offshoot of Lady Bird just hanging out of the box, various books, so we could do it. Also the good thing was we could amend it. With the stuff we'd done out of paper, you couldn't amend. And then this ended up being the front cover. So the front cover I had in my mind was that Peter Blake, Sgt. Pepper's idea of what if David Bowie and Chewbacca were stood next to it. I don't know why those two always stuck with me, but I just thought it was ridiculous to see those two together. So for the front cover, we created our own version, basically of like Sgt. Pepper's, our own scene set. A yearbook needs a yearbook photo, and these are representative of all the different subjects that were in there. So you've got David Bowie, you've got Arnold Machin, who's the sculptor, you've got a few Ladybird books, you've got members of royalty, Chewbacca, and then a racehorse. So a real kind of mix. So that was the front cover of the book, which I loved because I always wanted it to be on a white background as well, to feel really clean, and the burst of colour coming from the people. And then the back of the book, we thought would be a nice idea, as if you'd shot it from behind the cardboard cutouts. So it looks like a real cardboard cutout that I wish we could have made. But I just find it really funny that the horse is really high. Like he's like dangling from about 10 feet up, which is great. And then inside the book, it was just a great kind of piece of editorial design that we got to do. We had a lot of fun, and it was all focused around the ephemera for each subject as well that made up the scene. So these are some of the final kind of shots that we ended up doing through retouching. So this was David Bowie in the first studio he ever recorded in, but with all the different iterations of Bowie, so like original Bowie, Ziggy Stardust, kind of serious Moonlight Bowie, all of the different Bowies there. We included stuff like the book that he learned how to conduct an orchestra from, so I managed to source that and buy it, and we photographed that and included that. And then yeah, so all the different subjects ended up, so what happened, what could have been like a big disaster ended up being solved, and everything still looked great. And again, people still thought we were doing the paper idea with some of it, so some of them people thought were real paper, which is ironic. But it was such a fun project in the end. But it taught me a lot. It taught me kind of how to realise, to know your limits a little bit, to understand it, how to achieve something. There's a really good quote someone said in another talk about failure that I heard years ago, which was, I think it's from a chef, and he said, failure is good because it shows you a place that you never want to go back to. And I love this project, but there was a specific moment in this project that I probably don't want to revisit, and that was when I realised we need to find a new way of trying to achieve it, and I got really nervous and scared. but it was great, and it turned out really well in the end, and it was all sold. The next project I'm going to show you maybe doesn't have as happier an ending, but it was quite a fun one. It's called Moonlight. So there's a photographer friend of the chase called Paul Thompson, who he was always, again, when you get friends like this and people you work with and stuff, you always kind of want to pitch them ideas, especially if they're kind of creative. So you kind of go, what about this idea for your work, and what if we do that? Because it's fun for us, and it's kind of free work for them. Paul's an amazing photographer, and he'd done this series of work called Moonlight, which involved him basically sitting by the sea for hours on end, from like midnight to whenever, with a camera, and setting the camera to like a long exposure, and just using the light that comes from the moon, which you never see in the shots. It's what lights the images. And they're absolutely stunning images of the seaside. You never see the moon in them, but it's the moon that gives it its beautiful light. And he would literally just sit there for like 3 hours, open the shutter, and then just wait on his own by the sea. We thought it was an incredible story, and we thought, well, we could do something to kind of promote his work, promote this. And we had a few ideas, and one of the big ideas we had kind of came from just, again, reading up on different materials, different inks. We had this idea for, because the moon's not in any of the shots, what if we did a mailer where we sent out a beautiful print of it, but as a way to get people to engage it and spread the word, we could print a moon on it that's only revealed when you shoot a picture of it with flash. So if you get your phone out and take a picture of it without the flash, you wouldn't see anything. But if you take it with the flash, you would see the moon, so it would reveal the light source and some details of his work, and then people would share it and go, wow, isn't this amazing? So that was it, and it all came about because I found this company called Glowtech, who are, I don't know how they're still in business because they've got such a niche product, but their product is basically making glow-in-the-dark paint and ink. And I thought they were ace. I was like, we've got to do something with this. There's got to be a project where I can make glow-in-the-dark. And we found it, and that was this project. I thought this will work great. It fits in with the brief. I was like, perfect, this would be great. So I became a bit of a chemist at this point because we bought a load of it. I was like, this will work. We found a screen printer that was willing to screen print with it, and he started doing some tests using kind of like samples that he had around his studio. And obviously the whole thing that we needed was for it to be invisible. We couldn't let it be visible or else it'd ruin the idea. And I spoke to the company and they were like, yeah, it's invisible, completely invisible, you won't see it. I went, all right, sweet, send us loads of it. Sent us 2 weeks later, we got it, sent it to the screen printers, that came out. I went, we can kind of see it, but it might be different when we print with it. It looked crap. It looks like someone booted a football at it, and we were like, what the fuck is this? So the screen printer was like, yeah, it's too thick, you need to thin it down. I said, all right, so I spoke to him again, said, it's not working, it's not invisible, it's like, that is visible. And he went, no, it's invisible. I went, all right. I went, I'm looking at it now, it is visible. He went, no, you've just done it wrong. I went, all right, he said, we've got another one that's invisible. And I went, well, the last one was going to be invisible. He went, no, this one is, though. So I went, all right, send us that one. And that's how it comes out when you flash, so it worked. So I was like, great, it worked. So I was like, right, I'll do it again, but I'll do it with dots and stuff to make less ink. I also really got into it, I was like a chemist. Came out brilliant, flash, looks amazing, could still see it, looked like a dirty football kicked in it. And I was losing my mind at this, and I looked into thinning inks, how do you thin it, doesn't work, does not work. So, no offense to Glowtech, because they are a lovely company, but it's not invisible. So at the time we were really busy. Like the stuff in the background here was we were doing a project for a film. Our film team were filming their first ever feature film about Morrissey, and we were doing the job of scene setting. So every time you see something in that film, to make it look like it's set in the 70s, we designed it, so all the old posters and stuff. So we were already really busy, and I was trying to do this at the same time. I was getting fed up with invisible ink not being invisible. And unfortunately, it fell through the cracks. We kind of gave up on it a bit. We didn't think it was going to work. The idea kind of fell apart, and it just fell through the cracks, which happens, to be honest. Like, it's really hard to say, but like sometimes projects just dwindle out and don't get anywhere. And it's through no one's fault. The idea is great, and we might still be able to rework it, but it didn't end up going anywhere in the end because invisible ink is not invisible. And then months later, this came through the door. So this was the D&AD annual that year. And as usual, when a D&AD annual runs up, everyone wants to have a look at it, start flicking through, oh, that idea is great, that's amazing, oh, this is fun. And I was flicking through it, and then this idea popped up. And this is the same year we did this whole moonlight stuff. So it was a project for Volvo by Grey, who are an advertising agency. It's called Life Paint. And it's a brilliant idea because what it was is any Volvo manufacturer, if you were a cyclist, you could go to the garage and get a can of this. And it was spray paint that when you sprayed it, it was invisible, but then when a car's light reflected against it, it looked like that. And I was like, that is the weirdest timing ever, that whilst we were trying to work on this project for a photographer, Volvo were developing, went to Glowtech, I imagine, to get the ink to do this spray paint. I was like, that's so weird. And I was like, in a way, it was like a good miss, because I imagine if we'd entered the Paul stuff into the awards, it might have looked a bit weird, or if we did it a year later, people might would have gone, oh, you've just seen that and done it again. They're very different, I don't think they would have, but I just found it really serendipitous that whilst we were trying to screen print some non-invisible ink, Volvo were developing this, which is really bizarre. The final project I'm going to talk you through is the elephant. No, he's not an elephant, that's a bit hard. That's Elton John. It's the kind of elephant idea. We again do a lot of work with Royal Mail, a lot of fun projects with Royal Mail, and they're always on a variety of different subjects. So I've designed stamps about Shakespeare, and we've also worked on projects to do with Elton John. This is such a fun project to work on because basically Royal Mail had already designed the stamps, but they wanted us to do all of the products and ephemera and all of the collector's items that you get with the stamps. So we'd done all of the packaging and worked with Elton's brand guidelines and his brand team to develop all that. So all the packaging that the stamps come in, all of like the envelopes and everything to do with that, which was really fun. Even down to like a kind of a presentation pack which is all about his career and his life and times, which we got access to all his archives, all the images we wanted to have a look through. It was ace. And before the project, I didn't really know too much about Elton John. I knew a few, Candle in the Wind, but I didn't know about his life. And he's had an incredible life and incredible career. He's an absolutely fascinating person. And like I said, with any project, you kind of get one under the skin of things. And one of the things we did as well was they did a commemoration pack where you could get all the stamps at 12 by 12 inch size. So we thought, why don't we create an Elton John album? So it looks like a vinyl album, so that's what we did. So the big 12 inch booklet looked like it had a record in it, and when you pulled it out, it looked like a record, but really it was just the stamps fitted into there in a nice commemorative set. But like with any project, you want to get under the skin of it, you want to learn as much as you can, kind of really get yourself immersed in what it is you're trying to design for. And as I said before this, I didn't know lots about Elton John, and then that changed quite a lot. I quite like Elton John now, and that was epitomised in my Spotify Wrapped in 2019, which, as you can guess, most of the top 10 tracks of Elton John tracks, which is quite different, because it's kind of like Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, Candle in the Wind, I don't know why Candle in the Wind. And it's like Misfits, Pixies, Benny and the Jets. It was quite a heavy year for Elton John. But I'm not ashamed. I think Elton John's great. So it was just really funny to see that change in my Spotify rap. So yeah, all my top 10 songs were Elton John. And then as part of this project, there was another sub-project that came out in the middle of it. And because Royal Mail had been anticipating that this is going to be quite a popular release, they wanted to do some side projects as well as the stamps. And one of them they wanted to do was a collector's pack that, signified, represented one of his biggest gigs that he ever did, which if you've seen the film Rocket Man, it's featured quite heavily in that. So basically in 1975, for 2 days, Elton John did gigs at the Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles, which is their big baseball stadium. He had it was like at the peak of his career. He even got more popular after this, and they were an absolute huge event. And we had access to, Royal Mail said, we want to create a collector's pack to do with this. We've got access to Terry O'Neill's archives. So Terry O'Neill is a really famous photographer who's known for doing lots of like rock photography. So he's photographed all the big artists, and he was one of the main photographers there on that day. So he photographed all 2 days of the Dodgers shows. So any kind of iconic imagery that you see from there is done by him, and they're absolutely incredible shots. Like he's got amazing access. Like he's on stage with Elton John. You can see the crowd. You see obviously his outfits. absolutely amazing. He like, you know, the last image you saw, literally he ran up the steps from the stage to get that shot, then ran all the way back down to get back on the stage to get pictures of Elton. So he earned his keep, and they're incredible. So we'd always had this idea when we were doing the original Elton work on the packs that you'd seen previously. One of the ideas we pitched was about glasses. We thought, you know, Elton John's really known for his glasses, for his, you know, outlandish eyewear, and we thought, could we do something around the glasses? And it didn't really go anywhere. It was one of those ideas that was just parked, and it was kind of like, oh, we'll forget about it. But obviously, you know, we had thousands and thousands of these, and they're all, you know, very iconic. And then when we were starting to come up with ideas for the pack, what could we do? How could we present these images in such a way that feels like really grandiose, that represents the actual event itself? And it was this picture in particular, which again, if you've seen Rocket Man, you'll recognise it. It was such an amazing picture that I couldn't you can't really take it in, you know, what's going on. You know, it's him studying like 60-odd thousand people wearing a bejeweled baseball uniform. He's got carpet on his piano. The piano's, I think it's gold or it's silver. You know, you can see the Dodgers sign in the top there. It's so much to take in. But what I loved about it was it was an image that just kind of felt like you were there. The more you looked at it, the more you felt like you were actually in the thing. And that's kind of where the idea for this pack came from. Because I started thinking about it, I was like, well, actually, you know, what if we could make it feel more like as if you were actually there itself? So we had this idea as to whether we could stereoscope the images. So I think it's stereoscoping technique, or it's holoscoping or something. It's the old kind of school technique of like red and blue. You know, if you do that and you wear the red and blue glasses, it will make it look 3D. And we thought it fits perfectly because it fits in with the idea of Elton having amazing, you know, eyewear and glasses. And we thought, what if we created Elton John 3D glasses, made all of these images 3D, so it felt like you were at this event. It was, so we were like really excited about this idea. We thought it's a bit weird, it's a bit crazy, they might not go for it. And also there was a lot of kind of sign off. So we had to get Elton's people to agree to it, Royal Mail to agree to it, and Terry O'Neill, the photographer, to agree to it. And we presented the idea, and we didn't hear anything for a little bit, and we thought, oh, it's not gone anywhere. This is not going to happen, it's too weird, people, like, we can't make Elton glasses, like, where are you going to get them from? And then we spoke to Royal Mail a couple of weeks later, and we said, oh, have you got any feedback on that idea? You know, what's the thing? You went, oh yeah, no, we're doing it, yeah. We've got a manufacturer building some, he'll do 3D glasses for us, yeah. Did we not tell you? No. And he went, oh yeah, we found a factory that'll make 3D glasses in any shape you want. I went, all right, okay. What, so he's doing it? He went, yeah, what, Elton's, yeah, they loved it. All right, okay, he went, yeah, we need you to design a set of glasses by the end of the week, and they've got to be star-shaped. I went, all right, yeah, send us the template. So that was it, these are the glasses. So we made Elton John 3D glasses, and they went with it, and they loved it, and he said it was a great idea. So this ended up being the set, so this is a real set you can buy. So every image is made 3D, so that when you look through the glasses, it kind of pings out at you. And the design of it was quite simple. So the front cover, it was all emulating the typography of the Dodgers. So it's all like American red and blue. So red and blue is the colour of the Dodgers, which is great because it's the colour of 3D glasses. That tied in really well. Yeah, and it's just everything. So all the typography is based on the baseball uniforms. And then everything is just a kind of, there's a set list in there. There's a write-up of the whole history of the event. And yeah, we made Elton John 3D glasses. So absolutely buzzing, because we didn't really expect it to go through. These are us testing out the glasses. Not looking quite like Elton John, but maybe the hairline. But it was fun, and we couldn't believe it. And that was, to me, was my favourite idea, because it was the one I thought, no one's going to choose this. It was like, you know, tiling a public toilet. I thought, this is maybe a bit stupid. People are going to think I'm silly. But we went through it anyway, and it went there, and it went ahead. And it did really well. We were really excited about it. So that was kind of, for me, the elephant out of my work that I've done for 9 years. So to finish things off, I wanted to kind of give bits of advice. They're not massive. It's kind of things to think about, because I always think advice maybe is a bit preachy, but I thought just kind of things that, if I was in your situation, when I was in your situation, I would love to have heard about mistakes and about failures. And to lighten it up, I've put in loads of gifts as well. So the first thing is, failure is unavoidable, which sounds really depressing and really sad, but it is. You're always going to make mistakes. You'll never get through a career as a designer, or many careers to be honest, without making at least 1 or 20 or 50 mistakes. You know, the projects I've shown you through there feature a lot of getting things wrong. That's just how it is. That's how you get to the good ideas. That is the carving, is this making mistakes, hitting the dead ends, you know, getting there. You know, failure is unavoidable, but failure is also a spectrum. I don't particularly like the word failure sometimes because I think it's too grand. You know, most of the things you do that are just mistakes. No one's going to die. It's just graphic design. But to kind of illustrate this, I created a chart, which doesn't sound very graphic designery, but so this is the failure chart. So on one axis, it's time taken to rectify, so how long will it take to fix, and cost to fix, okay? And then the line that you've got to be under is the Atari line, okay? So if you're under this line, so if it's cheap, doesn't take a lot, then it's just a mistake, it's not a failure. If it doesn't take a long time and it costs shitloads, it's a failure, you've cost people a lot. The reason it's called the Atari line is because, if you ever remember, Atari were a computer games manufacturer, really popular in the 70s and the 80s, but then died a death in the 90s. And the big reason they died a death was they had one game that they produced, which was a tie-in to the film E.T. They spent shitloads of money on it, but they did it really quickly, and it was a massive failure. It was so bad it basically it failed the company. It was also that bad that they recalled every single copy of it and buried it in a desert and didn't tell anyone where it was. So it's like, that's how bad of an idea. So you can't have a worse idea than that. It can't be that bad. So if you ever think, oh God, I've really fucked up here, I've failed. If it's not above the Atari line, you've not failed, you're fine. So you're okay. The second piece of advice is it's fine to not know what you're doing. I think I like to explain, there's times where I don't know what I'm doing. You know, I've been doing this for nearly 9 years. I still have days where I'm a bit kind of overwhelmed and don't quite understand what's going on. That's perfectly normal. You're not expected to know everything. But it's important to ask questions, and it's important to speak to people who might know what they're doing and get their advice on it. That's how you're going to get better. But it's also good to kind of reflect on what you've done and understand, you know, how to get better from that. The designer Michael Wolff, incredible famous designer who founded Wolff Olins with Wally Olins, he said, when you think you know what you're doing, you're probably repeating yourself. And I think that's really true. If there's ever those days where you go, yeah, I'm nailing it here, I know what I'm doing, don't ask for advice, I'm fine, you're probably just doing the same thing over and over again. And that's the beauty of this job, it's not the same all the time, which is good, and it's also can be bad because it can be a bit stressful. But I think that's a really key quote to think about. The other thing, design is a thinking person's game. I'm a big believer in this, and this came from learning at UCLan through Andy and Ted and John and Pete, everyone. You need to take in as much as you can, as much stimulus as possible, because really the best ideas come from connecting the dots from things that you previously wouldn't have connected. Learn as much as you can about anything. Again, in the same way that I learned about reflective inks, for no reason whatsoever other than it eventually helped in a project. It's that inquisitive nature that's going to get you the better ideas, that's going to make you a better designer, it's going to make you a more interesting person as well overall. Again, another quote, I'm full of quotes on this, but this is from Robert Stickgold, who's a neuroscientist. And he's got, I think, one of my favourite descriptions of creativity. And he says, creativity is nothing more than taking information we already have and seeing how it fits together in a new and exciting way. And I think that's really important. It's about learning as much as you can because you never know when it's going to become useful. About connecting those dots to create, exciting new ideas that no one else has thought about before. So, the whole adage of, be a sponge, it might be cliche, but it's incredibly true, and it's something you can always learn from and you can always take from in the future. Even if it is just listening to lots of Elton John, I'm sure that's going to help me further down the line with another project. And the final bit of advice I got is don't be too hard on yourself or others. Bob Ross, gotta love Bob Ross, but it's only graphic design at the end of the day. Just take it in your stride. It's not of any use being very hard on yourself. Especially in this day and age, I find it, it was like that when I was at uni as well with stuff like Instagram. You see people's work and you go, fucking that work's amazing, why is mine not as good? Just everyone's experiencing that, everyone only shows the best bits. That's why I like this week of talks, because hopefully people will reveal the curtain and show it's not as easy as some people make it seem. So don't be too hard on yourself, don't be too hard on others. And as an example of that, I've got an email to show you, and this is my last slide. Some of you might have thought, when I said I worked for The Chase, you might have thought, oh, the TV show with Bradley Walsh. no, I don't work for Bradley Walsh or ITV or the TV show, but hundreds of people think that, and we get hundreds of emails, letters, tweets, phone calls. We've got fan mail, we've got books sent to the office, everything. It's mental. So I tend to collate, or a group of us tend to collate all the best emails that we get, because we get a lot of them, a lot of people, and a lot of tweets as well. So this is my favourite email we've ever got of someone who's mistakenly thought we were the Chase TV show, and I think it's just proof that you don't need to be so hard on people. It really doesn't matter at the end of the day. Just take it all in your stride. So the subject BTP. For ages didn't work out what BTP was, but I think you might get it quite quickly. Set at 20 to 6 on a Monday, so it's not much to do. Brad the Prick, which is what I think BTP stands for. It's shorthand for Brad the Prick, which I think is great. Brad the Prick calls the Beano an English comic, then tries to turn it around by saying it's a British comic. So he's clearly a fan of Beano. After Paul Sinner corrects him, he still has the fucking audacity to say, well, you know what I mean. Okay, very aggressive. Very aggressive for 20 to 7 on a Monday, and seemingly just doesn't like Bradley Walsh. The Beano is Scottish and always will be. Very typical English presenting. So I think hopefully this kind of shows you just take it in stride. There's no need to be so angry about stuff. Just take a deep breath and everything will be okay. It's only graphic design at the end of the day. Thank you. Standard reply, but it depends on who it is. It depends how much time I've got and whether it can be asked. But the reply to that one was, I find if you're just really kind to them, they kind of realise, because you get a lot of them, they do them at 3 in the morning, so they're clearly a bit pissed. And then they look back at their emails and go, oh no, I've sent an email to the Chase again. So we tend to reply saying, hi, sorry for the mix-up, but here's the actual email address if you want it. Harder to do when you get letters. We get letters through the post as well. But yeah, I did reply. I didn't hear anything back. So.
I think I've got a microphone working now. All right.
Yeah. Anyone else? Always tough, isn't it? Right at the back. Yeah, just about.
I just wanted to ask, because you showed a lot of really cool work that you kind of put in the drawer because they didn't choose it. Do many clients go for like the weirder or more creative like ideas? And if there are any that do, is there usually any telltale signs that like clients are more likely to do something a bit weird?
Good question. I thought you were going to say, can I have some of the ideas? I thought you were going to say, if you're not going to use them. It depends what, I mean, it really depends on the company as well. Like Royal Mail are very creative because they kind of have to, they have to be. And also the people that work there, there's a lot of designers who work there, so they're very literate. You can kind of tell because normally you get a good relationship with a client and you can kind of understand what they're going to go for after you've done a few projects. I think we try and push some weirder ideas. You know, we did a kind of did a pitch recently where, you know, they said like, you've got an idea there that is just really beyond the spectrum. Like, we're not going to go for it, but we like that you've put it in there because it's pushed it. I think a lot of times we presenting stuff, it's good to do that, try and push it. You know they probably won't go for it, but it could open up their mind to other ideas. Yeah, it varies client by client. You tend to know pretty quickly, and you tend to know by what industry as well they're in. But sometimes it's kind of it's a gentle build-up of like getting them to be a bit braver. So it might be again like pitching an idea that you know they won't go for, but hopefully it sparks something, and they go, oh, actually, remember that idea you had a while back? We might do that now because over time you've kind of built up that bravery. But yeah, I think very quickly you start to get it. If you get a good relationship with the client, you start to understand what they will like and won't like. But I think it's important just to try and push them a little bit. And even if they don't go for it, you've tried. And then, you know, unless it's ridiculous, they're not going to have a go at you for it. So it's fine. Yeah, good question. Good question. Anyone else? yeah, come and ask me any questions. Honestly, I'll be around, so feel free.
We're going to do that then, yeah? Yeah. Because we've got another speaker at 11:30, so we've just got to connect up and see if they're okay with their presentation. What time is it, okay?
Oh, it's like 5 to 11.
Brilliant. Okay, so we'll have a bit of a break now, but I want to re-emphasise there is a raffle and there is a tuck shop. So we'll see you back here about 25 past 11. Is that okay, guys? Time to go for a coffee or a tuck shop. We'll get a round of applause. Please, Gary, big round of applause.